Okay, so we are carrying on talking about cardiovascular system, so it's still the same unit, respiratory and cardio. So let me just write it down. So unit, respiratory and cardio. And specifically today, we are going to start talking about part of assignment 2, and it's all about structure and function of the heart. Okay, so assignment 2, and we're specifically looking at the part of this assignment which talks about structure of the heart. So we're looking. So just as a reminder, when we started talking about cardiovascular system, we were saying that cardiovascular system essentially consists of 3 main components. Can you remember what those 3 main components are? So the whole of cardio system, what does it contain?
Heart.
So you have heart. What else do you have? No, not cardiovascular system. Let's leave respiratory system on its own. So heart, what else does it what is this?
Brain.
No, not think about just cardiovascular system, nothing else. Right? Brain would be nervous system, right? I mean, fair enough, it contributes to regulating heartbeat, but it's not part of the cardiovascular system. Blood vessels, so heart, blood vessels. And what do we find in blood vessels, fairly obviously? Blood. Right? So what we have in essence is a transporting liquid which is floating through the tubes, which are your blood vessels, and those in turn, that blood, it needs to be moved around those tubes using a pump, which is your heart. So these are your 3 main components. So we already covered blood structure. We already talked about the structure and function of blood vessels. So today, that's what we're looking at. Okay, specifically heart, what its structure is, etc. So heart, in essence, it's a pump, right? So any system which requires movement of fluid through pipes, through some sort of system, requires force to force that liquid through. So in your house, you probably have a few pumps here and there, right? So for example, your boiler will have a pump, or even several pumps. Something like aquarium, that will have a pump. Any kind of industrial setup where you have system of tubes and water or some kind of liquid, it'll always have a pump to force that fluid through, right? So, and if you think about the heart, it is extremely efficient and extremely reliable pump. If you think about your boiler, the pumps in your boiler, how long do they last? I don't know, 10 years if you're lucky. If you're really, really lucky, maybe 15 years, but after a while you have to change the pump in the boiler and probably the whole boiler. If you think about aquarium pump, I don't know, a couple of years, yeah? So even with all our advances in technology, we haven't come up with anything as efficient and as reliable as your heart as a pump, right? So your heart keeps going day and night, unlike your boiler pump, which only comes on when you put heating on or hot water on. It keeps on going and going and going, day after day, you know, for months on end, for years and years and years. So that's going to be going for your whole lifespan. So maybe 70, 80 years, or even if you're lucky, maybe 90 years, or maybe even 100 years, right? And then you get your postcard from the Queen to say, congratulations, your heart carried on for 100 years. Well done, you, right? But that's how amazing your heart is. Okay. So when I was at school and we were studying this subject, in my head I had this picture where you had a heart, and then heart was pumping blood around your body, and the whole thing looked, in my head, like one big circle. Do you have that kind of picture in your head, right? So something I mentioned was, so here's the heart, and the blood is sort of doing something like that. Okay, that was my understanding of it. And I was actually really surprised when I found out that the actual picture is a little bit more complicated. So a picture like this would be called single circulation because it's got like a single loop. How many loops do we actually have in the human body? Does anybody know how many circulations of those loops do we have? Is our circulation single circulation, double circulation, triple circulation? Do you know? It's double, absolutely right. So we haven't quite got that kind of picture. Our system is a little bit more complicated than that. There are some animals which do have single circulation, which looks like that, but in human we have double circulation. So our circulation, I'm going to kind of simplify it a little bit, but in essence you have two loops. You have one loop, you know, coming out to the heart, going back to the heart, and then you've got the second loop doing kind of the same sort of thing, right? So our circulation is not that kind of circulation, ours is double circulation. Right? And then we'll discuss why we have double circulation rather than single circulation in a minute. Now those loops, circulations, they have particular names given to them. Okay? So I'm going to wipe this quick diagram off so I have space to write down the names of circulations. Right, does anybody know, have any inkling about names of circulations? Terry or Laura, no idea. Okay, so shall I just give you the names? If you do know, whoever's watching the video, amazing, so you can write those down even before I write them down. So the first circulation is called pulmonary. Pulmonary circulation, and that circulation goes like this. It goes heart. Does anybody know where it goes next? Pulmonary. There are some diseases which start with pulmonary, which affect a particular organ. Does anybody know which organ that is? Lungs, absolutely right. So it goes heart to the lungs, and then it goes back to the heart. So that's your first loop, first circulation. So heart to the lungs, back to the heart. So in your head, the word pulmonary, you should have like a little light bulb straight away saying to you something to do with lungs. Okay? Then the second circulation.
That's ventricular or something.
The second circulation, not quite. It's called systemic. So you've got the second loop, the second circulation called systemic circulation. So that circulation goes like this. It goes again heart, that's your starting point. And then it goes the rest of the body. By the rest of the body, I mean every organ other than lungs, because we already visited lungs in that first circulation. So it's heart, the rest of the body. And I'll put in brackets, meaning other than lungs. And then they go back to the heart. So that's your second loop. So pulmonary loop, pulmonary circulation, and the second one is systemic circulation. Okay, so here I'm going to start drawing some diagrams of the heart to show where the blood originates from and how it kind of ends up back in the heart. I'm going to simplify the structure of the heart, so even those of you who are not very good at drawing, you can still keep up, okay? But you have to appreciate that this is really, really simplified, okay? So if you look at the real picture of the heart, it's a lot more complex. But from these very simple drawings, you can still work out where the blood is coming from and where it's going into and what the names of these parts are. Okay, so let's have a go. So first thing, make sure you leave yourself a little bit of space around. Let me just maybe draw it a little bit lower. Sure. So all I'm doing is drawing something which resembles a tilted egg. Can we cope with that level of artistry? Hopefully, yeah, just about. Okay. give yourself quite a bit of space, yeah, so make sure you're not drawing it right next to the edges of the page. You know, you don't need like the whole page or anything like that, okay? But you just need a bit of space around, that's all. Right, so all I'm going to do is draw a very simple cross, a bit like that. Leaving myself a bit more space at the bottom compared to the top, because that's roughly the breakdown of these sections of the heart. Does anybody know what we call those sections as a collective word? What do we call?
Chambers?
Chambers, absolutely. So what I'm drawing here is essentially chambers of the heart. Chambers of the heart. So those 4 sections, they're known as chambers. Okay, so you're gonna help me out a little bit more. Do you know what the top 2 chambers are called? Which word do we use to denote the top chamber? Sure. No, okay. What about the bottom one? Laura, you kind of already said that word when we were guessing the word for systemic.
Ventricular.
Right. So the bottom chambers are known as ventricle or ventricles. So that's the word you were trying to suggest. Okay, so this is ventricle. And that's another ventricle. Okay, and then looks like we don't know the top chamber, so I'll have to just tell you. So if somebody on the video do know, maybe you're shouting out your answer, that's just amazing. So they are called, so this is atrium, and another atrium. So atrium on one side, atrium on the other side on top. Now, let's next figure out which side is which. So this side, is this left side or is this right side?
Left.
Correct, absolutely right. So this is left atrium and left ventricle. And then this is going to be right atrium, right ventricle. Now again, remember that the pictures which you see in my drawings or on the diagrams in books, you always have to imagine those pictures as if they were inside your own body, inside your own chest, right? So if I imagine that diagram inside my chest, that's my left, that's my right, hence left side, right side. Okay, so don't get confused there. Okay, just a little side note as well about spelling. So maybe I'll write it, I don't know, here somewhere in the little box. Again, we have some pesky terms which don't follow the normal norms of English language, and atrium falls into this category. So atrium, this is one, this is singular. But when you're talking about 2 of them, top 2 chambers, then you're going to be using the word atria. Is plural. Okay? So again, in your assignment, just be careful when you're referring to a single top chamber or to both of them at the same time. So you need to use the correct term. With ventricles, it's more straightforward. So ventricle 1, ventricles many. So that's the same rule as any other kind of, if you like, normal word, like table, tables, cars, etc. So there's no exception. Okay, so for me, it's going to be a little bit more simple, but you might have to redraw this diagram again, so I'm going to just leave my end, but this time I'm going to wipe it off. I'm going to start asking you some questions here, so keep up. Okay, so very quickly. And at this point, I'm going to start using red color and blue color. So what you need, if you're watching video and haven't got any handy, you might have to pause and go and find yourself. It could be pencils, pens, highlighters. It can be pink instead of red, you know, if you can't find red. But it needs to be a couple of colors. Are we all sorted with colors?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me then, what do you think red color is going to represent? What do you reckon? Blood. Okay. What about blue then?
Would red be oxygenated blood?
Yeah, so both of them are going to represent blood, but there's going to be a bit of a difference. So red is going to be representing oxygenated blood, meaning high or low in oxygen. High in oxygen, so I'll put like a little arrow. What about CO2? High or low in CO2? Low. And then therefore blue color, that's going to be representing, which word do we use? Deoxygenated blood, absolutely right. So deoxy. Okay, and that's going to be the opposite, right? So it's going to be low in oxygen and it's going to be high in CO2. Okay, so just clarify what those colors mean. I think I mentioned it before in one of the previous lectures. In reality, it's not like oxygenated blood is red and deoxygenated blood is blue in your body. It's the change of colors is there, but it's a bit more subtle, and we're just using this red and blue just to distinguish them clearly on diagrams. In reality, oxygenated blood is just bright red, and deoxygenated blood is more kind of muted red color. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so good. So here I'm going to go back to thinking about my pulmonary circulation and start thinking about where the blood is coming from, which chamber it's coming from, and which chamber it's going to end up in, right? So I'm going to start with the blue color, right? And I'm going to show that the deoxygenated blood is going to be leaving this particular chamber. So can you see, wherever I'm starting my lines with that blood vessel, that means that's the chamber where the blood is leaving from. Laura, try to do it without looking down into your notes. What's the name of that chamber? Same question to people on the video. So try to gather your thoughts. So left or right side, let's think about that. Right ventricle, right? So we're leaving right ventricle. And the earlier diagram showed you that we're going to end up in the lungs, so let me just put the word lungs here. And then that blood then is going to end up being oxygenated blood, and it's going to be coming back. Now, Terry, again, try to do it without glancing in your notes. What chamber is that? Left atrium. Boom, okay? Because it's just one of them. Right? And again, I'm going to show the arrow, so to show that it's coming from the lungs towards my left atrium. So that's my pulmonary circulation in a nutshell, without going into a lot of details. Now I'm going to wipe this bit off. And I'm going to do similar thing, but this time for the systemic circulation. So again, same tilted egg and the cross. And actually, you know what, before I even move on to that circulation, can I just clarify something so we're all on the same page? Can you tell me why is the color changes from blue to red when we pass the lungs? Can you put it into words, into a sentence? Why does this color change occur?
Is it because diffusion happens from the high to the low concentration?
Yeah, where?
In the lungs.
In the lungs. Can you remember, what were the little sacs called where that gas exchange? Alveoli, exactly, right? So think about here, assignment 1, where we talked about gas exchange in alveoli and how oxygen is going to get into the blood and carbon dioxide is going to leave the blood, and that's why you have that change from blue to red, from deoxygenated to oxygenated blood. I just wanted to check that we're all okay with that. Okay, good. So now I'm starting, Laura, again with you. So I'm going to start with this chamber here, and I'm going to show that blood is leaving. Which chamber is that going to be?
Left ventricle.
Left ventricle, absolutely right. So it's oxygenated blood leaving left ventricle. And that blood vessel keeps splitting and splitting and splitting into smaller and smaller and smaller blood vessels until you get to lots of capillaries. I'm going to show them as this sort of lots of lines. And in those capillaries, the oxygenated blood is going to turn deoxygenated. So at one point, it's going from red color to blue color. And that color is going to be then that deoxygenated blood is going to start getting gathered together in bigger and bigger and bigger streams until you get to much bigger blood vessel or vessels, and they're going to end up in this particular chamber. Terry, your turn. What's the name of this chamber? Again, try to not look in your notes. Right atrium. Spot on. So again, those of you watching on the video, make sure you're coming with us and you try to answer those questions as well, okay? Try to do it without looking in the notes again. It's just to help you try to memorize those names of chambers. Okay. So that sort of series of lines, all those capillaries, essentially represent what is happening in the rest of your body. So that's what the rest of your body is, the rest of the body. Okay, I'm just trying to marry that diagram to the one I did earlier, like that loop for systemic circulation. Okay. Again, let's discuss it briefly. Why is the color of blood changing from red to blue in the rest of your body? What's happening once that blood arrives to organs? What's going on there?
Is it like the one? So is it the ones that like the oxygen that's not needed or that's being used? It's recycled, so it leaves the body and then it starts the process again.
Okay, so where is that oxygen going to go from the blood? So at the moment, right to start with, it's in the blood capillaries, in the bloodstream, and it's got lots of oxygen. Where is that oxygen going to go?
Organs?
Organs, exactly. And what are organs going to be using that oxygen for?
To survive.
Well, yeah, but more specifically, what is it being used for? Again, going back to assignment 1, the magic equation. Terry, you could help us out a bit.
Oh, and respiration?
Aerobic respiration, exactly, right? So that oxygen is going to go into your cells, right, to be used for aerobic respiration. And at the same time, those cells are going to be producing that waste product, which is carbon dioxide. And that's why the color of the blood is going to start changing, right? So more and more oxygen is going to leave, more and more carbon dioxide is going to jump into the bloodstream, and so overall you're going to end up with deoxygenated blood coming back towards your heart. I hope that makes sense, okay? Now, on my diagram, I showed that change to be kind of, you're jumping straight from red to blue, but in reality, of course, not quite like that. It's going to be gradual change. So in some diagrams, you might see some purple color where we're sort of suggesting that gradual change. So if you have purple color, you can kind of do a bit of kind of mixed picture somewhere in the middle. I don't have purple markers, so I can't do that, but it's just something you have to keep in mind. All right, good. So we are going to be referring to this diagram again and again and again, so make sure you sort of keep track of that and try to remember which chamber we're leaving and which chamber we're coming into for both circulations. So now I'm going to wipe it all off. Am I okay to wipe it all off now? Okay. So I need more space now. Okay, so let's talk briefly about size and location of the heart. So size and location. So that first section was more to do with circulation, which is the introduction and the two circulations. Now the next little subsection, we're talking about size of the heart and the position of the heart, or location of the heart. First of all, how big is your heart?
Don't they say it's like more than the size of your
Right, yeah, so a lot of people compare it to the size of your fist, which is actually a really good comparison, because the bigger person you are, the bigger fist you're going to have, but so bigger heart you're going to have, because it should be pumping more blood around the body. If you're a really tiny petite person, right, you're going to probably have slightly smaller heart. Now, it will also depend on how physically fit you are and all sorts of other things, but as a rough guide, men, for example, tend to have bigger hearts just because they're bigger people, more cells to serve, and therefore heart muscle needs to be a bit bigger. Right, so if you think about your fist, so imagine that's inside your chest, right? So let's just write that down. So approximately size.
Teacher was normally that big, I think it's good.
Fist. If you want more precise measurements, I've got it sort of an average, and I've got it in inches for whatever reason. So it's 5 inches by 3 inches as a rough average. As I said, it really will depend on whether you're male, female, big, small, physically fit, and all sorts of other things. But as a rough guide, that gives you an idea. So if I draw a rough picture, so imagine this is your sternum. Sternum is that bone here, right, which is sort of connects to your ribs. So it's right in the middle. So this is sternum. So then your heart is going to be that tilted egg, and if I draw it, let me just try how it goes. So something like that. Okay, that's your heart. And a lot of people say that your heart is on the left side of your body, which is partly true, but you can also see that some of it is sort of peeking out a little bit also on your right side. So round about 1/3 is on the right, and then 2/3 approximately is on the left side. Okay. So sorry. And about 2/3 on the left. So it's not quite all, totally on the left side in its entirety. So some of it is also found in the left side. So if you again picture your heart as that egg-shaped object, right? Then the pointy end of the heart is close kind of to this end, so that section, and this is known as apex of the heart. So that's the pointy end of the egg, if you like. I didn't draw it particularly pointy, did I? Probably should have done it a bit more rounded at the other side. Let me try. Okay, so more of an egg shape. That's the way I was taught, so I'm going to repeat it, but a lot of people then afterwards make fun of me. But I was told that apex, roughly, if you sort of imagine like a straight line coming from the apex, then it roughly corresponds, apparently, to the position of your left nipple. Now, some people say, well, not in my case, probably in my case, right? But maybe not necessarily everybody's case, but I think sort of it gives you just a rough idea of where it's sitting in your chest, right? But just repeating what I was told when I was a student, so don't judge me too harshly. Right. So the next point which I wanted to make is that the heart is not just sitting there inside your chest; it actually has some protective coverings around it. So what a lot of people imagine, if you had like an open heart surgery, so imagine that surgeon is sort of opening the chest, they're moving ribs out of the way, and when they open the chest, that is, right there is the heart. And it's not quite as simple as that. In order to get to the actual heart muscle, you would have to cut through protective covering, and that protective covering also has got some liquid inside it, so it's like a sac which is filled with fluid, and inside that sac you have your heart. So in order to get to the heart muscle, we would actually have to cut through that covering, right? So called pericardium, which I'm going to write down in a minute, and only then you would be able to kind of peel that, if you like, that layer of the heart, and then you can get to the actual heart muscle and see it beating in front of you, okay? So let me just write that down. So heart has protective